the St. Louis Rams walked onto the field with their hands up, don't shoot. And I think this is really great, and here's why. There is a movement happening across the country right now that asks the question, fundamentally, how do we police the police? Because right now we don't really have a good mechanism for that, and it's been a problem for, easily 3-4 decades, and arguably, a couple of centuries. Who will police the police? I kept pounding on this last week, kept asking this question. Nobody has offered me a good answer. I mean, there are some local communities that are developing police review boards. But my two takes on the police in the abstract, separate from the Michael Brown case, is number one, we need to have higher standards for the people who become police and higher pay for the people who become police. Number one. And number two, we have to have some way to police the police that doesn't use the criminal justice system, that is the local prosecutor and the local grand jury, that works hand in glove with the police on a day-to-day basis and requires a good relationship with the police in order to do their job. Those folks are just too biased, totally biased, hopelessly biased. I mean, meanwhile, we're even Michael Brown's, even Darren Wilson's supervisor's testimony before the grand jury conflicts with Darren Wilson's testimony. But what has happened now, because of the way that this prosecuting attorney in St. Louis County handled this case, Mr. McCollum, Bob McCollum, because of the way he mishandled this case, there was never a trial. The job of a grand jury is not to decide guilt or innocence. It's not to present both damning evidence and exculpatory evidence that could get you off evidence. It's to only present the prosecutor's case. That's what you have grand juries for. This is what Justice Scalia told us. In a Supreme Court decision, Scalia goes off on this long rant about how the purpose of a grand jury is to present, it's to gain an indictment. Is to present the prosecution's point of view, not the defense's point of view. And what Bob McCullough, the prosecutor in this case, did was present the defense point of view, the defense of the police officer. So anyhow, the St. Louis Rams came onto the field with their hands up for a few seconds. It went viral, national, and Joe Scarborough, of course, white Republican former congressman from Florida, from the Deep South, comes on national television this morning and says this.
If this movement is important enough to you, don't base your movement on a lie. And I expect the commissioner of the National Football League to suggest to the St. Louis Rams, their ownership, their coaches, their general manager, and their players, that having players before the start of a National Football League game make a gesture that suggests that St. Louis police officers gun down young black men who have their arms in the air saying, hands up, don't shoot, I suggest you have some work to do. You have some work to do, not just on Ray Rice. You have some work to do to talk to those players, because the cops have every reason to be pissed off this morning. Every reason in the world. And by the way, if I've offended anybody by saying what I've said, trust me, 95% of America think just like me. Just because there are cowards that won't say that on TV, that's your problem. It's not mine.
Well, maybe 95% of white Americans think that way, although, frankly, I doubt that. I mean, from the surveys that I've seen, it might be a little over 50% of white Americans think that way. And certainly African Americans and Americans, Hispanic, Asian, whatever, people who are not, quote, white Americans don't think that way, Joe. But here's the thing. I mean, he starts right out by saying, if you're going to do the hands up, don't shoot thing, don't, if your movement to presumably police the police, I mean, Joe Scar never says exactly what he thinks this movement is. But he says if it's important enough to you to promote it on national television, don't start it with a lie. The lie being that Michael Brown has hands up in a don't shoot position. Well, that has not been demonstrated to be a lie. There has been no trial. There has been no cross-examination of the witnesses. There's been no evidence presented on either side in a way that it can be examined by the other side, because only one side presented anything, which was essentially the defense. Even though it was done by a prosecutor, it was done wrong, and it was, according to the Supreme Court, it was done wrong. But I find this just bizarre. I think I'm not totally surprised that Joe Scarborough would go off on this rant, but I think I find it personally really sad. Here's a guy who's got a national forum, who's supposed to be a reasonable Republican, and as a former member of Congress and as a guy who swims in political as well as legal waters, Joe Scarborough should be bright enough, and I believe he is. I think he's frankly just pandering to the lowest common denominator in his audience, trying to get some of those Fox numbers. Because he is smart enough to know that we don't know if it's true or if it's a lie that Michael Brown had his hands up. The majority of the witnesses said he had his hands up. There were one and maybe two witnesses who said he didn't. There were a couple of witnesses who said he had his hands out, which could be like, whoa, stop, don't shoot. But not necessarily up above his head, but out in front of him. I mean, nobody knows. There's no videotape of this. And there has been no trial because this prosecutor screwed it up so badly. So anyway, I guarantee you the right wing and the racist dog whistles, the Nixon Southern strategy, the Reagan gives his first speech in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the 3 civil rights workers were murdered, and gives it on states' rights. This stuff, what you are seeing right now, is the worst of the Republican base, the worst of the racist Republican base, pandering to the worst nativist, racist elements in the United States, getting ready for the 2016 election. And it's a shame. It's sad and it's wrong. So, anyway. And along those same lines, the Republicans now, this Ian Rifowitz over at the Huffington Post, Republican payback to white working class that voted him in, cut the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit. The Republicans are, they've got to come up with a budget, right? So what do they want to do? They want to cut the earned income child credit. This is basically tax money you get back if you earn below 130% of the poverty level. You don't earn enough money to pay taxes. In fact, you actually get money back. It supplements your income, and it's one of the things that's kept millions of people out of poverty or right on, in a way where they can raise their families. The Republicans want to make permanent, huge tax breaks for industry and do away with the tax break for the working poor. Brilliant.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, the entire Republican agenda is pander to racism. And by the way, while you're doing it, cut taxes on rich people and cut benefits to poor people.